Hey, what's going on, Nole Nation? It's CJ Wilson here with Dope Talk. I'm your host, here to bring you some information in regards to the December window transfer portal thus far for FSU. As you guys know, there's two windows. You have the December window, pretty much which wraps up the college football season, and you have the spring window, which pretty much, is your end of the spring practice cycle window for the transfer portal. Within that window is more so those are the guys that if they feel like, they just didn't cut it on the team or they feel like the team isn't going in the right direction. Say, for instance, like a Keon Coleman. You have an ultra talented Keon Coleman who entered the transfer portal in spring due to Michigan State's, I guess you could say, future going forward. Or you could have a kid like, well, I'm not going to get into the names in regards to that, but just a kid in general that possibly wasn't cutting it on the depth chart, felt like, okay, I'm going to give it one last shot and try spring practices to see how I fall within the depth chart. And just, based off the 15 spring practices, wasn't in the best shape in regards to play for the upcoming season. So they ended up transferring after. So, like I said, we have two windows. I'm kind of going to cover FSU's grades, so to speak, for all of the acquisitions thus far in the transfer portal. Now, when I say thus far, I do think we'll probably still be active a little bit within the spring transfer portal window, like I just previously stated. But as far as the December window, I think it's safe to say that FSU is done unless someone rather, out of the two national title contenders enter the portal and intrigues FSU interest, then we'll do another video. But until then, I really feel like FSU is kind of done right now. So we're going to get into the offensive grades right now. And first off, we'll start off with the quarterback, Thomas Castellanos, transferred from Boston College. In his in 2023, he had 3,300 total yards and 28 touchdowns. This upcoming season, this 2024 season, rather, as you guys know, there's a change in head coach in Bill O'Brien, and those guys went to a more pro-style offense. And Thomas' numbers dipped from a yardage perspective, but his efficiency was a lot higher. He had 1,300 passing yards, 18 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. Rushing yards were completely down this year, going from over 1,000 in 2023 to just under 201 touchdown in 2024. Ended up getting benched later on in the season by not Gus Malzahn, my apologies, by Bill O'Brien at Boston College and transferred to Florida State. Now, I mentioned Gus Malzahn because, as you guys know, there's a prior relationship there. He initially signed with UCF and decided to transfer to Boston College once playing time wasn't really available for him at UCF. Long story short, the marriage is rekindled again. Thomas Castellanos is the quarterback in Tallahassee and reuniting with Gus Malzahn, and Gus gets his number one guy at the quarterback position. My grade for this acquisition, I'll probably give it a B, just for the simple fact there's a lot of unknown variables with Thomas Castellanos as far as pushing the ball and passing the ball downfield. Now, I do agree 100% with he's the perfect fit for Gus Malzahn's offense and what he wants to do, so to speak, with running the quarterback. But I don't really get too fixed in regards to a coach being a system coach and only running one system and having skill sets and having players that only have those type of skill sets. A good coach pretty much adjusts to the best attributes of the players, in my opinion, in regards to the skill set. That's neither here or there. But as far as Thomas Castellanos, he's a perfect fit for Gus Malzahn and what is needed in Tallahassee, so to speak. As you guys know, this past season was the worst as far as the offensive line perspective, and our quarterbacks suffered from it with all the sacks and pressures they took. And I think the offensive line issues kind of go back past 2024. 2023, I think we masked a lot with Jordan Travis's escapability. Even in 2022, I think the offensive line was a lot better in the run game, but the passing game, if you guys remember that miraculous, I think it was like a third or fourth down in 2023, once we played 2022 rather, when we played we played the Florida Gators, and Jordan Travis did a Houdini move to get out of a sack a couple times and had like a sports in the top 10 highlight. In the perfect, well, not necessarily the perfect world, in the normal world, Jordan Travis at that point in time was a perfect world. But in the normal world, a quarterback is going to get sacked 10 times out of 10 during that situation. We just was lucky enough to have Jordan Travis, and he made things look a lot better. But like I said, as far as pushing the ball downfield, that's my in consistent accuracy. That's my biggest concern with Thomas Castellanos. But he's a dynamic playmaker in the run game, escapability. He's able to extend plays within the pocket. And that helps out with the offensive line that may not be, which I think would be a lot better this year. We'll get to that in a second. But just from what we see in the offensive line, that hasn't been that good, right? So you have that. But I know a lot of people kind of talk about his height and things like that. I really don't think that's a factor due to him being able to move around in the pocket. We've seen in these past years short quarterbacks be able to make things shake. And hell, he played in the ACC and was a starting quarterback, and I don't think his height was the issue at Boston College. Other things, of course, was the issue. But like I said, moving the ball downfield consistently is my only concern. I do think we got a lot more weapons for him at his disposal than he had at Boston College for this upcoming season. But as of now, I think it's a B grade for Thomas Castellanos as far as the acquisition for being the quarterback for FSU. We'll see how that plays out. Moving on to the receiver position. We had a lot of fun at the receiver position. I give the acquisition of Duce Robinson, the 6'7", 200, sorry, 6'3", 6'6", I'm sorry, my apologies. 6'6", 230-pound, super ultra athletic receiver out of USC. As you guys know, Duce was a 5-star prospect out of high school, ended up being a 5-star prospect again in the transfer portal. Father Dominique Robinson played for FSU, had a big fourth down catch by Chris Ricks for 4th and 14, right? I think FSU likes those 4th and 14 situations for dramatic fashion. But a big 4th down catch against the Florida Gators from Chris Ricks ended up getting upset in the swamp. And of course, we added the ultra athletic, ultra speedy, ultra dynamic, ultra explosive Squirrel White out of Tennessee at 5'10", 170 pounds. For me, I think the grade for both of these guys would be an A minus. A minus. So we have an A minus for the receiver acquisition. And the reason I say A minus is maybe we would have got one more guy to kind of take it over the top of it being a home run. But I really think this is a home run. If you combine the stats between Dominique and Squirrel, we're talking about production coming into Tallahassee. 170 career catches, 2,400 receiving yards, and 13 touchdowns is being added to the FSU receiver room. Again, we talk about the receiver room. This is a position that FSU had to address, and I feel like they addressed it big time in the transfer portal. We'll see in the spring if they decide to add anyone else based upon what we see within spring practice, or if someone within the receiver room elects to transfer out, then you can see probably FSU play with a few things as far as spring practice. But as of now, the addition of Duce Robinson and Squirrel White, I feel like this combination is going to feed a lot of families. When I say this combination is going to feed a lot of families, we have a 6'6", 230-pound ultra-athletic receiver that can stretch the field and go over the top of guys. And then you have Squirrel White, who's just a bona fide speedster, got the 23 miles per hour in play speed for Tennessee. He's a dynamic playmaker. Once you get the ball in his hands, he could take it to the house at any point in time. Speed. So you have your guy in the inside that could do a lot of things in the inside, make guys miss, and make a small play a big play. Then you have the 6'6", 230 guy that's going to be a matchup nightmare for defensive backs. So if we speak about the receiver room, I like it a lot as far as the changes. But for these two acquisitions, I'm going to give it an A minus. Moving on to the tight end position. This is another position FSU had to address as we lost Kyle Morlock to graduation, and we lost a plethora of other tight ends to the transfer portal. And also, you got to remember, we moved over true freshman tight end Amari Williams over to the defensive side, which has always kind of been the plan. If you guys remember, he was a 5-star kid that reclassified to the 2024 class that played both ways. The only production you had back at tight end was another 5-star receiver in Landon Thomas. So we have Landon Thomas in the fold, and we bring in Randy Pittman, who I think was a dynamic playmaker, and Marquise Douglason. Both of these guys are kind of familiar with FSU. Randy Pittman himself, speaking of him, he was committed to FSU at one point in time as a recruitment, if you guys remember, going back a few years ago. Randy comes in at 6'2", 230, more of an H-back tight end, pretty much just an athlete that you can use all over. And I love the way that Gus Malzahn used Randy during his time at UCF. He had 51 catches for 631 yards and 3 touchdowns the past 2 years. A lot of production. Like I stated, Gus used him in a plethora of ways. Your traditional tight end in the backfield as an H-back, and also you can split him out wide as a wide receiver as well. So you have a dynamic playmaker. He's from the Panama City area, was committed to FSU initially. Love that he's coming back now, but he has a lot of production at the tight end position, which we need to kind of match with Landon Thomas. So those two, Landon and Randy, could be a really dynamic duo going forward for the 2025 season. And then you have Marquise Douglason, the former FSU tight end, ended up transferring to Arizona State. You guys know him as Biscuit, really big body guy. FSU covers his blocking ability, so you add that to the tight end room as well. the addition of those two guys, I'm gonna go with a B plus for the tight end position. We'll see how things shake out in the spring, but really good acquisitions, especially Randy Pittman, who brings a lot of production within the pass catching aspect. 51 catches and 631 yards. Now to wrap it up, let's go ahead and move to the offensive line. Um, I can't rave enough about this offensive line and the job that Herb Hand has done in bringing in bodies, and not just bodies, body types for one, and a lot of snaps, a lot of playing time, and production behind that playing time. So for me, I think the offensive line grade, I'm going to go with an A thus far for what we've been able to do in transfer portal. Really good get. It's going to start off with Gunnar Hanson. He's your left tackle, 6'5", 330-pounder, transfer from Vanderbilt. Had 30 career starts for Vanderbilt, only gave up 1 sack in the 2024 season. Had his best game of the season against the Alabama Crimson Tide, as Vanderbilt ended up getting the upset over Alabama. Excuse me. Go ahead to the center position. We have Luke Petitbon, transfer from Wake Forest in conference. He was all conference at Wake Forest, 6'3", 285 pounds. We ended up moving on from longtime starter Maurice Smith, and as you guys know, like I said, this offensive line was atrocious, and center play was pretty bad as well. Just to give you some numbers of Luke and how big of an addition this was for FSU. When I say big, I mean big. This is one of the key positions outside of course, the tackle that we need to address on the offensive line, which is the center position. As far as the pass blocking grade, he had an 89.8 pass block grade in 2024 among P4 offensive linemen. And shout out to my guy Clay Fink for 247 for getting these stats. Real good guy when it comes to numbers and all that type of deal. He's the guy you need to get in contact with. So 89.8, which is tied for third among 405 active offensive linemen in the P5 rank. His true pass set grade was 87.8, which is third again out of 405 offensive linemen. His pass block efficiency was 99.3, which is tied for eighth out of 405 offensive linemen within the P4 ranks. 5 pressures allowed in 2024, which is tied for 13 out of 405 centers, allowed just 0.4 pressures per game. Every O lineman in 2024, just for perspective, averaged 1.0 plus pressures per game. So he added 0.4. Every offensive lineman for FSU that played and started averaged 1.0 plus. 1.0 is the bare minimum for FSU offensive linemen. So that kind of gives you the perspective in regards to what Luke brings to the table. A very dynamic center for FSU, has ACC experience, like I stated, started for Wake Forest for multiple years. This is a very, very underrated get for FSU. All right, moving on to the guard position, Adrian Medley, sitting at 6'5", 305 pounds, had 19 career starts for UCF. He comes over to UCF with Gus Malzahn and Herb Hand. Again, big body and a lot of starts. So we have proven production and we have size, right? We don't have your generic 6'3", 6'4" guys across the board. A lot of size. When I say a lot of size, we're going to wrap up the offensive line position with this one. Micah Pettus, the 6'9", 350 offensive lineman transfer, right tackle transfer from Ole Miss. Another guy that's had 30 career starts during his time at Ole Miss and has been very productive for the Rebels. So 6'5", 330. You have a center at 6'3", 285, which is the smallest out of the bunch, but understands technique, understands blocking assignments, understands angles and getting in certain spaces to block to kind of compensate for the size. And you have 6'5", 305-pound guard and a 6'9", 350-pound tackle. And then you bring in Richie Leonard, who was our best offensive lineman last year for FSU prior to getting hurt and ending his season for the season, ending his playing time for the season. So that's your other guard. So I think this offensive line is going to be a lot different going into the 2025 season. A lot of experience, a lot of proven experience, a lot of size. Herb Hand knows exactly what he's doing in regards to that. It's going to be interesting to see him get in there and coach these guys up. So like I said, we have a B for Thomas Castellanos at the quarterback. We have an A- at the receiver position, a B+ for the tight end position, and we have an A for the offensive line position. So to wrap things up with the offense, I'm going to get an offense a B+ overall. As far as the grades thus far, I think that grade could be a lot higher in the spring because I do know FSU was trying to get a home run, game breaking running back in the transfer portal. And a lot of guys know that one of those backs that they did target was Rasul out of Utah State. Just some information I'm hearing in regards to a process for Rasul. He has to get a waiver approved to play football this year. So it's going to be interesting to see if he does end up suiting up for South Carolina. That did give FSU some type of pause, but it wasn't to the point where they didn't want to pursue him, anything like that, or they didn't want to commit to FSU. But nonetheless, I do think FSU will be active in the transfer portal in the spring for a running back to add to the running back room. We'll see how that plays out. That could drop or bolster the grade, but from what I'm hearing, FSU, if they do take a running back, it's not just going to be any running back. It'll be a game-changing type of running back. So we'll see how that plays out. But as of now, I'll go to B+ for the offense. Make sure you guys like this video, subscribe to the channel. We have the defensive grades coming up next as new defensive coordinator Tony White looks to take shape and mold the 2025 defense to his liking. Go ahead and like this video, subscribe to the channel. Go Noles.